Time now to catch up on the latest business news. Charles Pellegrin joins us in studio for that. And Charles, we're going to start, in fact, in China. The government there has just unveiled its economic goals for the year ahead.
Absolutely. Publishing its government work report this Wednesday at the annual meeting of the National People's Congress. And the emphasis for the world's second largest economy is on boosting domestic demand in an increasingly hostile international environment. Exports are what has driven the economy in the past few years, but the prospect of tariffs and trade barriers is forcing the government to change tack and look inward. Let's focus on the major economic goals set out by the government. It's set out to reach 2% annual inflation. This is the lowest target in more than 2 decades and really underlines the deflationary pressures on prices amid stagnating consumption we've seen there. As far as economic growth is concerned, the aim is also to reach 5% GDP growth this year, the same as the last 2 years. And perhaps the most noteworthy number here, the government will increase its spending to the extent that it has raised its deficit target to 4% of GDP, the highest level in decades.
And there is, Charles, more that the government has also announced to boost that domestic demand.
Related to that increase in government spending, Beijing has also announced it will be issuing 1.3 trillion yuan in special treasury bonds. That's about 170 billion euros to fund stimulus measures. It's also raised the amount that local governments will be able to borrow from 3.9 trillion to 4.4 trillion yuan. That's around 570 billion euro. The aim here is to create as many as 12 million jobs in cities with an unemployment rate of 5.5%. Premier Li Qiang stressed the importance of improving China's domestic situation. Take a listen.
Domestic conditions for China's sustained economic recovery are not strong enough. Demand is weak and consumption is sluggish. Companies face difficulties with production, operations, and overdue payments. There are pressures on job creation and income growth. The government's effectiveness needs to be improved.
Impact then on all of that on the Asian markets, Charles?
Well, they're trading higher this Wednesday in spite of U.S. tariffs and global trade tensions. As you can see, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong with the biggest gains, over 2.5%. Those trade tensions that might have been tempered by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying in U.S. media that a deal could be reached with Canada and Mexico that would reduce the tariffs that were slapped on Tuesday.
Of course, another consequence of the change of American policy under Donald Trump, Europe is ramping up its defense spending.
And the need to ensure Ukraine's defense is placing financial strain on European countries, especially without American contribution to the war effort. As a result, Ursula von der Leyen proposed a defense plan Tuesday that would cost 800 billion euros. Carolyn Baum takes a closer look.
Inside this building in Brussels sits the Russian Central Security Depository. In its possession, 190 billion euros of shares and bonds held there by the Russian Central Bank. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a total of nearly 300 billion euros has been frozen in Europe. These Russian investments bring in over 3 billion euros of revenue per year, which has been used by the EU to finance a massive loan to Ukraine. Some European leaders want to take it further.
Let's use these 300 billion euros to help Ukraine.
But confiscating foreign assets falls into a legal gray area and would be an international first.
It wouldn't be an act of war, but it would be an act that goes against international accords to which France and Europe have agreed.
Meanwhile, Europe is faced with the challenge of financing its own defense budget. Ursula von der Leyen announced a new plan Tuesday to rearm Europe to the tune of 800 billion euros.
Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe.
The EU has called an emergency meeting in Brussels on Thursday to discuss how Europe can support Ukraine without American contributions.
Now I'll be back around 9 a.m. Paris time for the opening of the European markets.
Okay, for now, thanks so much indeed, Charles Pellegrin there. Time for us to take a short break. Back in just a few minutes.